You are listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark.
Well,
Hello, everyone.
hello. It's In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. We're back. We missed last week, but we're back now. I'm the Reverend Mark Adams from, where am I from? St Margaret's Church, Barking.
You are, and I am the Reverend Jennie Adams from Holy Trinity at South Kensington. Hello, everybody. We are here.
We are here. Normally we have a little thing before we start recording which says who's going to speak first, and we forgot to do that today. But anyway. Well, a bit
We have
tired,
been
aren't we, Jennie?
traveling the country trying to fit in some social life along with ministry.
We're a
So
little
we're
bit
now a little
tired.
bit tired and weary.
And it's a
Anyway,
bit warm. Anyway, we're here, so all is well.
Sunday's reading. What is it, Mark?
It is the very challenging and unfamiliar passage, the parable of the Good Samaritan, which brings its
Okay.
own challenges, doesn't it? Because we're so familiar with it and it's such a familiar story. That...
Let's get on with it. Come on.
Oh
Do you
my
want to
word.
read it?
Okay, let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. Right. Okay, so I'll read it then in the spirit of just getting on with it. I'm going to read it.
Okay.
This is Luke chapter 10, reading from verse 25. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Jesus, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbour as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbour? Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while travelling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Okay, come on then, Jennie. What are we going to say about this? You must have some questions because you always do. So.
I've actually been thinking about this quite a lot because it reminded me of a book I'd read. Okay, so for once in my life, I think I actually know where I'm going to go with this sermon.
Okay, so tell me, because I'm preaching as well, so that'll be great.
Okay, it brings in several thoughts. So the first is the lawyer who is asking the question is trying to find a loophole with who is my neighbour, and we all know that that's part of the great commandment, love the Lord God and your neighbour as yourself. But Jesus doesn't answer who is our neighbour really ever. What he actually does is explain how to be a good neighbour.
So hold on. I've got questions now. It's my turn to have questions.
Okay.
What's this loophole that he's looking for?
Well, I think to be a good neighbour, that leads me on to my next bit, really. Because I suspect, so what I was, no, okay, that's making no sense whatsoever. Where do I start? The book I have read a long time ago was called The Art of Neighbouring.
Okay.
And I was just trying to find out who it's by for everybody. It's Jay Pathak and Dave Runyon.
Okay.
And it's very much it's an American book set very much for American apartment blocks. Okay, so you have to kind of take some of it. But their thinking was, what if Jesus was onto something and he actually meant your actual neighbours? Because, of course, they lived in community.
Right.
Much tighter knit community than we do nowadays. Anybody who's had a lot of neighbours, and I was just adding up before I came on here. So this is my 23rd home. Okay. I've had my fair share of neighbours. Okay. Neighbours can make your life amazing and they can make your life an absolute misery. So I do wonder whether he actually had some problem with his neighbour, or also if it's just loving everybody, that suddenly becomes a task so big that we do nothing.
Okay.
I I think in many ways it's so overwhelming that we realise that we can't do that for everybody, and we end up doing it for nobody. So
Okay.
the book obviously got into my memory. So, and their idea was just start with your neighbours. So look for the 8 closest houses, apartment blocks, or whatever. Work out if you know their names, what they like, or anything like that. Just being a good neighbour, not having good conversations, not being
You
a
like a good
neighbour so you can
conversation.
convert them, just actually being a good neighbour. And imagine how different our towns and cities and the world would be if actually every Christian that went to church was just doing that in their neighbourhood. Um, and they go on to do lots of things, just invite them round or give them a meal. And I
Okay.
just thought, yes, go on.
Well, what's the loophole? I'm still not quite sure what the loophole is. I mean, it's great. I like that idea. I'm not quite sure how we were doing it as we were sitting out our garden this morning, slightly moaning about the noises of the man clearing his throat from our neighbour. Was going with that. If you want to really get practical about it, but
I'm not suggesting that we're doing a good job of this by any stretch of imagination. In fact, I would suggest that our neighbours are being good neighbours to us more because they do come and bring us food to eat and that sort of
they
thing.
do. We do have yeah.
Yeah, so we're probably letting the side down somewhat, really. The loophole, I think, was I think he was trying to get out of being nice to anybody. I mean, he knew it was the commandment, didn't he?
Yeah, I take a slightly different view, although I think it's interesting. I just think he's got himself into a hole because he's tried to challenge Jesus on this point of the law, and Jesus has basically made him look a little bit of an idiot. So he's trying to. Well, it says, doesn't it? He tries to. I love the phrase. In order to justify himself, it's kind of he still wants to keep the upper ground against this sort of upstart itinerant preacher who's got no training and just thinks this is gonna put him back in his box, really, put Jesus back in his box.
Who is my neighbour?
Well, it's a sort of, he's been, we know that he's trying to test him. Lawyer stood up to test Jesus. What must do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? And Jesus gets it. He then quotes the commandment, doesn't he? Actually, the lawyer, and Jesus says, "You've given the right answer. Well done." So there's a sort of tussle going on between the two of them about who's, and then I love he's trying to justify himself. We all do that from time to time, don't we? We all sort of get ourselves into a position where we think, I've just got to go that little bit further. And I think that's kind of what he's doing. And it's sort of slightly supercilious. Who is my neighbour? That kind of tone of voice. That's how I imagine it. But, I think I like that doesn't take anything away from your idea that, the idea that our neighbours are the people who are closest to us, who live closest to us, because, we are quite. I mean, we are, aren't we? We don't really know our neighbours around here very well.
No, we don't. No, we don't. I think it's a very practical way of looking at it. Um, yeah, maybe he was doing that. I've never really read it like that. I've always assumed that he just didn't, he was trying to get out of something. That it didn't really mean those people closest to him.
Well, I suppose in one sense, these things are not necessarily, the exclusive, are they? I mean, I think, yeah, he is perhaps trying to work out, what does this mean? Do I really have to do this? All the same sort of questions that we would ask, really. I mean, actually, your thing about the neighbour, literal physical neighbours, is quite challenging, isn't it? Because, of course, you don't choose your neighbours; they just are there. And as you say, you can get on well with them. They can make your life difficult. They can make your life. Well, there is a program called Neighbours from Hell, is there not? I mean, I think so it's easy and of course, they can be very different from you, as actually you know,
And
our
you
neighbours
are,
are here where we live. We live in a, you know, for those of you who don't know Barking in East London where we live, where I mean, I'm the vicar here, Jenny's in Kensington, but you know, it is a very diverse,
mm,
multicultural area. So you know, actually, in one sense, the questions raised in the parable are not are quite applicable in one sense to our idea of neighbours. And what does it mean for us to live in a cohesive society with people from backgrounds from all over the world? You know, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting to put it in that context, actually. Yeah, and you're right. Two doors. I don't think we got one this year, but two doors up. Ramadan, our Muslim neighbours there, bring us Ramadan food with a little note, and you know, not sure
yeah,
I've
and it's lovely,
done.
and they're really good neighbours. I mean, I
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
yeah, I say they can make your life amazing. I mean, people will not move house because they love their neighbours so much and they don't want to leave them. And I've definitely had some really, really good ones in the past. I've also had some really bad ones, and it is so stressful because there's no escape. Home should be your safe space,
yeah.
and it's really, really difficult if it's not. Um,
Having said that, though, and I think it's an interesting idea to develop, but having said that, the coming into the parable, the Samaritan is not the physical neighbor, the next door neighbor or in the neighborhood of the man beaten up on the side of the road, is he, or vice versa? So there is a kind of greater universalizing, is there not, of the neighbor concept here?
so he's teaching you how to be a good neighbor, and even the outsider could be a good neighbor, surely.
Yes.
Who was the neighbor? The neighbor was the man that did good, who was happened to be the Samaritan.
Who
Okay.
happened?
So really,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So the unexpected, because that's what the Samaritan was really, could still be the good neighbor. He still knew how to be a good neighbor. Go and do likewise. Go and be like the Samaritan is outrageous, isn't it? Um, but I don't think he ever tells us who is your neighbor. He tells you how to be a good neighbor. And
Yes.
is that because being a good neighbor is subjective?
Oh. Oh.
Or
Well,
maybe we shouldn't be thinking about who is the neighbor, just how are we being a good
so
neighbor?
I think this is my long-standing take on it. I haven't, and I've preached on this before, Good Samaritan, obviously, and I remember my key to understanding this, not that I've looked it up again in preparation for this, but is whose perspective are you taking in this story? Who are we in this story?
Hmm.
And I think the way for me to understand the parable of the Good Samaritan is that we tend to put ourselves in the place of either the priest or the Levite or the Samaritan. That's where we place ourselves. And we think, well, I don't want to be like the priest and the Levite going past on the other side. I want to be like the Samaritan. We might not always be like the Samaritan, but that's what we aspire to be, right? But actually, for me to understand, hold on, I haven't finished yet. For me to understand the perspective, you've got to place yourself in the man in the ditch. We are the man beaten up by the robbers in the ditch. Therefore, what you know, who is the neighbour? You know, it doesn't matter who they are. That's I think my understanding of
We're
the.
the man in the ditch. See, I thought we were the lawyer.
Well, I suppose to be fair, you could put yourself in any of those places. But yeah, I think Jesus is inviting the lawyer to be the man in the ditch, to be the man beaten up by the side of the road, the man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And what does that mean? So, you know, means that our neighbours are the people who are willing to show mercy to us, who are willing to go the extra mile for us, who are willing to use another one of Jesus' phrases, but you know, who are willing to.
So are you looking along the almost the lines of humility? So so last week had the sending out of the 70, 72, depending
Yeah,
on
yeah.
who you're reading. But going with nothing. And that's surviving in a town in a very vulnerable state. So I suppose, is it just to carry on from that? It's funny,
Well,
isn't it?
possibly, but I think if you think about the passage, it's like who is the ordinary person in Jesus's telling, right? So given that he's not speaking to a group of Samaritans, he is speaking to a group of Jewish hearers in his day who are not priests or Levites. They are the man walking down the road who gets beaten up and put in the ditch. So it's the position of, it's about inviting us to be putting ourselves, I think, in the position of vulnerability rather than the position of power. Who are the ones who are okay? Who are the priest or the Levite or the Samaritan who's presumably wealthy enough to go and pay for, and then what does that do to the story? I think that's the interesting way that I kind of look at it, that we need each other, that we're not sort of, that we need our neighbours, that we need to be both giving to our neighbours and willing to receive from our neighbours, because it's not always easy to receive either, is it? Do you want the
That's what I'm
Samaritan to
saying.
help
You
you?
take it almost like an extension of the last week's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would work. I've never really done that. I've never really done that. If I wasn't, I don't really. Well, I've never really thought that Jesus was inviting him to put himself in the place of the man in the ditch. More a case of, well, actually, I think Jesus was inviting him to look at least the Samaritan does this. Would you do this? And I thought, yeah, I've always read it that we're more like the lawyer, always questioning.
That's how
Always.
we tend to read it, and that's not I don't think it's illegitimate reading. You can certainly read it like that, but I think it's just interesting to play around with it. So, your mother has a theory about the power of the Good Samaritan, doesn't she? Do you want to run that one by us?
Yes, my mother's read it. Her conclusion is Jesus says that you need to be nice to the people who are nice to you, because the Good Samaritan was the one that. But what was the final line of the reading?
Go and do likewise.
No, before that.
Which of these three do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise.
So go and do likewise. So the neighbour was the one that did him, was doing nice things, and therefore we only have to love the people who do nice things to us. Is her take on it?
And
because
in one sense, actually,
actually,
she's right. She has a point in the reading of it, but you've got to play. This is where I think it's about putting yourself in the place of the person, the man in the ditch, because you've also got to get that bit about why is it so shocking that it's a Samaritan. Because you shouldn't be being nice to each other. The Samaritan shouldn't be being nice to the man in the ditch, and the man in the ditch really probably shouldn't want the Samaritan to be the one who's going to help him, because and this is not difficult to place into contemporary context, is it? So I think she's right up to a point, but you've got to kind of take that.
Is it not difficult to put into contemporary context?
I don't think it is.
Okay, so if you were beaten up by the side of the road and in a ditch because you're going to put yourself in a ditch, who would you not want to come and rescue you? Because I don't think that I've got any kind of
I think
group.
that's the point. There's nobody I wouldn't want to come and rescue me, but there are our neighbours from other backgrounds, other cultures, who we can certainly put into that, who we're challenged not to put into that space.
Okay.
I would suggest.
Yeah, okay, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
Different.
go on Twitter, or X as we're supposed to call it, and just see how people talk about others from different backgrounds, right? I don't need to spell this out, do I?
No, I suppose not. Yeah. You have
I
different political
don't need to spell this out. You can go and read it for yourself.
I suppose so.
Do you just look at the way we talk about and dehumanize other people? Look at the way we talk about, I know there's lots and lots of political issues around asylum seekers and illegal crossings of the channel and all this kind of stuff, but just go and look at the way it's written about and the way we speak about other people. It's not hard to see that.
It's true, but I don't think, okay, it's a good reading of it, but I don't think that would be that helpful in a sermon. It would just go over their heads. I think people who think like that would just always, I don't think this is going to be shockingly different and they're going to change their views. I think if we were in a Bible study, that would be a different thing. Because we would have more time for discussion. But sermon-wise, I don't think I'd go down that route because I don't think it would make any impact at all.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah,
But it's certainly challenging, isn't it? I think it. For
yeah,
me,
I agree with the premise.
about.
Yeah, I agree with the premise. I just think if I've got those people in my congregation, and who knows, I think they would just switch off.
I mean, I suppose you can always also put yourself in the place of the Samaritan, can't you? And think, what the Samaritan might also be thinking, why should I help? Why should I help this person, this Jewish person, is sitting beaten up on the side of the road? I'm not going to do that. They don't like me. I don't like them. Let's just go on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to remember that none of these people existed. It was a story.
Yeah, but Jesus is telling the story he's choosing these characters for a reason, isn't he?
Yes.
So it's like, I mean, I feel so uncomfortable talking about it because all of these tensions are still really alive and well in the world today, aren't they? But that's in one sense what makes it all the more challenging. We don't get to sort of sit separate from all of this. We're involved. We're in this too. And I think actually to come back to what you were saying at the beginning, I mean, especially perhaps living here, but it'll be true for other people too. That's why the question, bringing it back to actually your neighbourhood, actually I think it's a good idea because it makes it real.
Yeah, I think that the challenge can be so large and overwhelming that you end up doing nothing. Because it's just too much. You look around there, the actual need and the troubles and the challenges are just too much. And therefore, if you can't solve it, you don't start. Whereas you can just be nice to your neighbours and get to know them.
Well, I think you can look at this from two different perspectives. So yes, but actually the challenge of saying you've got to be nice to your neighbours is much harder. Actually, in a way,
because I mean, it's all about us living here and saying it. But if I look back at some of my houses and somebody had said it, like,
not always thought completely charitable to our next door neighbours. I mean, I just think I think it's an interesting idea that when you, in one sense, you can make it easy by generalising it out and saying, well, we've just got to be neighbours to the whole world. Oh, actually, you've got to be neighbours to your neighbours. That's really hard because now that's like, I mean, even I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that. I mean, I suppose, taking parcels for people and.
I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? I mean, so I'm looking back and thinking of the house where I came home and my neighbours had lifted the fence panels out and were just sitting in my garden. I didn't even know what to say to them. I just walked past and went, hi. What do you do with that? So yes, although we might look at each other when somebody's clearing their throat or, I don't know, being extra noisy or smoking stuff that perhaps they could rather not do right outside our fence.
Off you go over the fence to us.
I think I've had far worse. But also, what is it? A smile, ideally.
So I think from our conversation, I suppose, things that, I mean, it is a very familiar passage, isn't it? And I think things that we've referred about before. So both from our conversation and I think the things that I think are interesting are what is going on with the lawyer, right? What does it mean when he says he wants to justify himself? What's he trying to do in this conversation? He certainly goes away with his tail between his legs. I think we can say at the end of the day. So I think that's interesting. I think playing around with what does it mean to place yourself, kind of imaginatively in the different characters in the story, as I think it's interesting to do and see how that looks from different perspectives. And thirdly, I think your thing about actually really bringing it home and actually literally to your neighbours, those people live around you, what that then means, I think it's an interesting idea to take out of it. Yeah.
And that, people's, is your sermon if you're writing one this week.
There you go. That's that. You can. Thank you very much. Now, we're not going to be around for the next couple of weeks. I know we weren't here last week. Definitely not going to be around for the next couple of weeks, but we will be back again in 3 weeks' time, I guess, won't we? We'll be back to do something.
Yeah, we're back ready.
We will definitely be back in 3 weeks' time. We won't be here for the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Be good while we're gone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation with Jennie and Mark. Please subscribe for more episodes on all the usual podcast platforms.